on a washing line next door.
Yes.
And that was recorded as a non-crime hate incident. The thing is, Suella Braverman, when she was Home Secretary, she laid down strict rules telling police not to enforce lots of these things.
Yeah.
What did Yvette do? She removed all of that completely. So
I know, absolutely mad. Have you been watching this strange story over in America about the US drones that have been flying around over New Jersey? Let's have a look on our little window into the world of American politics. This is some Pentagon and military chiefs talking about them.
These are not U.S. military drones. Again, this is being investigated by local law enforcement. What our initial assessment here is that these are not drones or activities coming from a foreign entity or adversary.
You're telling me we don't know what the hell these drones are in New Jersey are? Is that correct?
That's right.
It's crazy. I mean, that's crazy. That's madness that we don't know what these drones are.
And that's the thing, apparently, and Donald Trump's been talking about this, and Sebastian Gorka's been talking about it as well, who's going to be the new counter-terrorism chief in the White House, good friend of this show. He's been saying, well, if the government doesn't know what they are, or the government hasn't identified them, or the government is not actually checking out where they're coming from, then they're either incompetent and or ridiculously stupid, aren't they?
And we always assume that America is the best country in the world for its security, you know, all this sort of thing.
Right.
Apparently, whenever they send up helicopters, the drones disappear completely, you know?
Yeah.
But, you know, why can't they just shoot one down? I mean, I just don't understand why there's...
sort of Roswell incident type stuff and check out whether it's got an alien inside it.
It's a field day for the conspiracy theorists.
It really is. Here's what a News Nation reporter said.
Hi, Elizabeth. Well, I got to be honest here. You know, when this story first came out a few weeks ago, as a resident of New Jersey, as a journalist, I didn't pay it much credence. I thought it would turn out to be a bunch of pranksters and this would all be over by now. The experience I had last night, however, changed the way I feel about this story completely. What I saw was more sophisticated than I ever imagined. Take a look.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 5 lights, 6 lights.
I didn't believe what I was seeing. But what was I seeing? We're here in central Jersey. We've been looking for the past hour. I think we've seen about 40 or 50 of these drones. In fact, there's one over my shoulder right there. One after another, these drones appeared in the night sky. If you look real close, they look like fixed-wing aircraft, about 8 to 10 feet wide, colorful, white blinking lights.
That is not a plane.
Definitely not an airplane, but what was it?
That's the question. I mean, I don't know what it is. Do you know what it is?
Well, 8 to 10 feet wide. That's much bigger than I was expecting it to be for a drone.
Yeah.
I mean, why can't the Americans just send up other drones to try to knock them down? You know, they've got a lot of, you know, we see what drones can do in the Middle East and Gaza.
Yeah.
Surely they can just take one.
You would think. It's a bizarre story, isn't it? We'll have to keep following this, I think. It'll be one of those stories we follow all week leading up to Christmas, because it's one of those things. Daily Star, by the way, I'm sorry to burst everybody's balloon about how lovely and calm the weather is and how sort of mild it is. According to the Star, the fright before Christmas, hold on to your Santa hats, folks. Storm Eowyn, E-O-W-Y-N, I think that's the right pronunciation, is on the way to wreck our fun. 70-mile-per-hour winds and rain, which is going to hit just before Christmas.
Well, good news for Ed Miliband and his wind turbines.
Yeah, they won't be operating. Absolutely right. We've got much more to do, including Ian Hislop getting hit by an e-bike and Brussels sprouts getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. This is Morning Glory.
Why are young people getting this disease, which is fatal in about 40% of people? And so if you do have recurrent symptoms, even if you're under 40, you should see your doctor. And to be fair, if you have outlet rectal bleeding, that means presumed hemorrhoidal bleeding, there's a very simple test to do called a flexible sigmoidoscopy, where we can look inside with a telescope 2 or 3 minutes, no sedation needed, no risk at all, and all the issues about GP waiting lists and so on. But that's not an excuse not to take this forward.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. Rafe Heidelmann-Koo is here with us. Front page of the Daily Telegraph, Rafe. IHT raid will cost more than it makes. No one is safe from Labour. This is Kemi Badenoch saying the anti-farmer policy is going to hit the public purse. We've got a long way to go, I think, between now and the spring. Farmers have already pledged that, the tractor demonstrations that they've been doing are only the beginning. They might actually start, boycotting supermarkets. They might actually stop supplying food, none of which would necessarily help their cause. But basically, an awful lot of people are now starting to say to me, looking at what the government is doing and saying, they are preparing possibly for a bit of a climb down on this.
Well, I mean, look, when you see the actual forecast now made that it's going to cost £1 billion more than it makes. I mean, it makes a farce of the whole thing. The entire reason, rationale for doing this was fundamentally flawed, because people aren't investing. Analysts are estimating that 125,000 jobs will be lost as a result of this inheritance tax raid. It's going to cost £2.6 billion loss in income, and whereas they were only estimating 1.38 billion will be raised. Right. So, I mean, what is the justification for this? Yeah. It's just the same thing as they're squeezing on private schools.
Yes.
The cost
which
of that.
We've already seen in Surrey. This is a story that came out at the end of last week. There's no actual places in parts of Surrey for kids coming out of private school who can't afford to go there anymore. So they're going to have to bus them, believe it or not, to neighbouring counties to go to state schools a long way from where they live because they don't have any spaces.
And I'm amazed, who would have thought that the world's finest customer complaints executive would get the economics so badly wrong on all of this.
I know.
Putting ideology before business sense.
Absolutely right. Let's talk about Brussels sprouts. I mean, I don't know whether you're a fan of them. Some people get very worked up about them. Some people love them, some people hate them. I actually had a lunch yesterday. A very nice friends of mine had a home-cooked meal in their house, and they made a sort of a Brussels sprout style bubble and squeak, which was really good. But according to people in the know, Brussels sprouts are going to be bigger, up to 25% bigger than ever before. And normally at this time of year you hear there's a Brussels sprout shortage, or there's a shortage of pigs in blankets, or there's a shortage of something or other, cheese. This is the first time I think there's been a positive story, because scientists have worked out that good growing conditions and new variety have brought about bumper sprouts for Christmas.
But then, as we know, isn't it, smaller things taste better than bigger versions. So will they taste as good?
Yes.
I loathe Brussels sprouts. Do you? Because my mother would boil them to oblivion. Yes. If you have them, I think, fried in butter and all the rest of it, I think they probably do taste more. Yeah. But, this should be bad news for all the environmentalists, given
because
given the global warming and methane.
They've all been telling us, all the crops are all going to die.
No, I'm thinking more about the consumption of Brussels sprouts due to global warming.
Yeah, there is absolutely that. Also, front page of the Telegraph, finally we find out the new face of Match of the Day is not going to be necessarily one particular person to fill in for Gary Lineker. It's going to be a series of 3 people, and one of whom is Kelly Cates, in line to be one of 3 people replacing Gary Lineker, including Mark Chapman and Gabby Logan. Is that going to make people watch Match of the Day less? I don't think so.
Well, you know, I'm not a football person. I'm tempted to ask my old friend Joey Barton what he thinks about this particular
He's apparently... I was watching something of his on Twitter at the weekend. He's apparently going to take up boxing. He wants to now fight a few people.
Didn't tell me that.
No.
Yeah, I don't know who this Kelly Cates is. I mean, I have to say, not knowing any of these people, when I saw the picture, I thought, here we go, sticking another woman in. But apparently she's done a very good job at Sky Sports.
Sky, yes.
And so she seems to know her stuff. But you can't help but look that there's Mark Chapman, Gabby Logan, and Kelly Cates, and it just seems like an odd. It's
another. It would appear to be, as good as they all are, another sort of opportunity for the BBC to make something good happen, and they've once again blundered it and made something bad happen, right?
Well,
they can't seem to get anything right. Why don't they just appoint one person to be the new Gary Lineker? It's almost as though they don't want to do that in case Gary Lineker doesn't like it.
Well, at least we can celebrate the departure of Gary Lineker from our lives.
I mean, that would be nice, yeah. Although I'm sure that he's already, you know, polishing his boots for the Saudi Arabian World Cup, because you know how he likes to go and, you know, complain about human rights while receiving a large cheque for appearing in that very country, as he did with Qatar.
Well, you know, I'm of the age where, you know, David Coleman, Jimmy Hill, these were the characters.
Kenneth Wolstenholme.
Yeah, and, you know, Des Lynam as well.
Yeah.
And it just seems that we don't have gentlemen of that calibre, you know, people who just weren't political, who just gave you what you wanted, and they were warm.
And were quite funny.
They were funny.
Into the bargain.
And everyone could enjoy them, rather than being so divisive as we see all the time now.
Now, over the weekend, I don't know if you tried to travel by train anywhere, but the South West Trains network was completely and utterly scuppered because they couldn't find any drivers. This despite the fact that, of course, you know, Louise Haigh gave them a big pay rise, mammoth pay rise, 15% just a few months ago. Similarly, Northern trains weren't running either. We now hear this morning that ministers have handed train driver union brands a pay hike of up to 75%. This is on top of the last pay rise, just to do a bit of overtime, because apparently they have 3 days off a week because they work a 4-day week. They always get very worked up. I was on Twitter last night arguing with a few train drivers. They always get very worked up and say, you couldn't do what I do, I could do what you do. And people go, well, you drive a train in a straight line. You don't have to turn right or left. You occasionally might have to go backwards a little bit. You just have to make sure you stop at this. No, it's much more complicated than that. But here's the deal. Green-lighted by Heidi Alexander. £580 to work an overtime shift between Monday and Friday, and £600 at the weekends for one shift. And they only work 4 hours at a time.
And this is happening whilst they're taking away the winter fuel allowance for pensioners. This is what you have to remember. You know, this 22 billion black hole,
isn't it?
Is, you know, the pay rises to the public sector have gone through the roof.
Yeah.
And our farmers and our pensioners are paying the price for all of that. You know, I have a friend who became a train driver as a second career.
Yeah.
Because he knew the pay was so good. He just said it, you know.
It really is.
I spoke with him a couple of weeks ago, and he said the pay rise is an absolute disgrace. He said there was no justification for it. Right. I said, oh, did you refuse it? Oh, no, I didn't refuse it.
No, of course, why would you?
Why would you?
But the point is that, you know, they are paid a ludicrous amount of money for what they do.
Yeah.
And, I mean, they can cry till the cows come home that they do a very, very difficult job, and it's very stressful because somebody might jump out in front of it and kill themselves. Well, sure, I'm sure that's true. But, nevertheless, it's not really, surely to heaven, it's the most difficult public sector job you can have.
Well, it's amazing, you know, we've got these new Piccadilly line tube trains coming out in a couple of years.
Oh, yeah.
State of the art.
Yeah.
Why are they not driverless?
Yes.
You know, the unions are such a stranglehold.
Well,
you know, the Victoria line trains were built to be driverless from the 60s. Yeah. You've got the DLR. There's no reason that we are buying new trains that require drivers at all.
And of course, the unions will say, oh yeah, the DLR might be driverless, but there's always somebody from you know, the union sitting there watching it. Well, that tells you how powerful the union are, as opposed to whether it's necessary. You know, the union have managed to get somebody to tell them, yeah, we have to still pay a driver, even though he's not driving the train, because it drives itself. And we're going to convince everybody that if he wasn't there, it would be incredibly dangerous. Yeah. Well, it's not, is it?
Walk off a train, walk on a train, doors open.
It's just not. Talking of transportation, though, a picture of Ian Hislop in the Daily Mail with a big sort of bandage on the back of his head. Apparently he was hit by an e-bike while crossing a road in London last week, leaving him needing medical treatment.
I hope that e-bike wasn't badly damaged.
I hope not. Yeah, that would be wrong, wouldn't it? Do you remember I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago, he's a bit accident prone. He was in a taxi and the back window suddenly shattered, and the story went out that somebody had tried to shoot him, which of course turned out to be complete rubbish.
Paul Merchant, probably.
Yeah, no, it just so happened that the taxi had gone over a particularly bad pothole, and the back window shattered. And nobody was trying to shoot him at all. He had to sort of issue a retraction, as I say, because at first he went, somebody's been trying to shoot me. Turns out, no, it's actually not the case. But now that somebody's run over him in an e-bike, maybe there is some kind of vendetta. Maybe there's somebody out there who's trying to take over the show. Who can say? I don't know. Back to the NHS. It turns out NHS visitors are now being told to wear masks when they go back into hospital, which we haven't seen for a while. And physician associates, and these are people who are now working instead of doctors in various scenarios, apparently are not allowed to work alone. So what's the point of them?
Well, I'd never heard of this physician associate before in my life, and I was amazed that they were actually doing doctor's work despite not having a medical degree. Can you imagine that?
I know.
How confident would you be? And the General Medical Council formally began to regulate the profession on Friday.
Yes.
So what on earth were you doing?
I know.
Allowing unregulated people to basically, do the work of doctors.
Yeah.
And it comes after reports of patients coming to harm or dying after seeing a PA.
Yes. It is a bit of a worry, isn't it?
It's
a bit like
very worrying.
When I was in America, they used to have a show called Emergency Ward 10, which was just another one. It's like Casualty, right? And the guy from it used to come on TV, and he would go, "I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV," and then he would endorse some kind of product or other, which was supposed to be good for you. And you go, "Oh, great, okay then." And these people are similar to this, I think. I'm not a doctor, but I know a couple of doctors quite well, and they've hired me to help you out because there's a bit of a long waiting list. So I'll tell you what I think you should do, and it's up to you whether or not you take my advice.
Yeah, and the plan is to have 10,000 of these guys.
Oh, brilliant.
Can you imagine?
Fantastic.
I don't know.
Bring it on. Let's talk about... Kelly, here's one from Martin, because I want to mention, actually, Gareth Southgate. Kelly Cates is Kenny Dalglish's daughter, and she is very good. Yes, she is very good, Martin, but not because she's Kenny Dalglish's daughter. You shouldn't get a job in television talking about football just because your dad played football. It's a bit like me going, well, my dad was an artist, so I should get the next, South Bank show on the grounds that he knew a lot about art.
Well, as a historian, the classic one for me is Dan Snow, who now poses as a historian by having no historical qualifications, who happens to be the marriage to the Duke of Westminster's cousin.
Right.
And
he's the son of...
Sister is the son of Peter Snow, the famous Peter Snow.
The man with the swingometer.
His mother is the Canadian version of Peter Snow, and he's the great-grandson of David Lloyd George.
Right.
The ultimate Nepo baby.
Yes, absolutely right. Well, speaking of which, I saw a story over the weekend that not only is Sadiq Khan getting a knighthood, but they're going to give one to Gareth Southgate. So I put out a tweet going, brilliant, now you get a knighthood for coming second. And people are going, he's the most successful British-English football team manager in the history of football. And I'm like, yeah, but he didn't win anything. He literally did not win anything. He came second in a couple of finals, and now we're going to knight him for that very reason.
Well, there's nothing more British than coming second, not winning. So that's fine. Probably why he merits.
But let's not, welcome him into this sort of the knighted area, for heaven's sake. Not having heard much recently, can anyone tell the public when charges might be brought against the Manchester airport assailant? Says Pete in what can only be described as a text that we get every single day. I can't tell you. The CPS can't tell you. The Manchester Police can't tell you. And Andy Burnham can't tell you either, because apparently nobody knows. It is remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely ridiculous. And one from Mark in Selby. Mike, the Saracen's Head that you mentioned earlier is in Old Amersham, not Chesham. Can the Mail not get anything right? Well, I mean, talk about nitpicking. I mean, I've seen references to Chesham and Amersham as one place. I know that they're not one place, but if you go to Amersham and Chesham, they're not very far away. My apologies, Mark.
I've never seen a Saracen's Head pub anywhere, actually. So
have you not?
No, I'm surprised that it's...
Well, I used to go to one in Bath, actually. And I don't even know if it's still there. But yeah, fascinating. Anyway, listen, Rafe, good to talk to you. Good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. We will be, of course, talking about a great many things throughout the course of the morning. The Prime Minister is apparently in Norway, so we'll be tracking him. Somebody suggested to me, and I've meant to talk to Christian about this, that we could have a sort of, a bit like the Santa tracker, on New Year's, Christmas Eve. We have a Keir Starmer tracker and just see where he's going. Because he's been all over the world. Samoa, America, South America, Brazil. He's been in the Middle East. We could have this crisscrossing the entire globe. He's in Norway today, doing absolutely nothing. We'll get some voice notes coming up in the next hour.
spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in on ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk. Welcome back to Morning Glory, 2 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham. This, of course, is the home of common sense, the one place for you to be, to hear all of the things that you need to hear, and some of the things you didn't even know that you needed to hear. I'm Mike Graham, and we will be here all the way through until 10. 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory every single weekday morning, 6 until 10. And when we get to Friday, we will be leaving for a little while because I'll be taking off the next week. So Christmas week, I'm afraid, I won't be here. There will be other people here instead. Don't worry, they'll still be holding the fort and keeping everybody sweet. I think Christo's involved. I think David Bull's involved. You'll get plenty of things to do. Don't worry. Let's hear from some of you on what you said this morning.
Morning, Mike. It's Simon from Devon.
Morning, Mike. Great show as normal.
Good morning, Mike. It's Shirley here in the very frosty Cotswolds.
Morning, Mike. Brian from Southend. Monday morning, stuck in traffic as usual, but with your show to listen to, makes it a bit bearable.
Yay!
Who can doubt that that's what you hear when you hear Keir Starmer? He's off in Norway today, apparently, promoting unproven carbon capture technology. Even Dale Vince, right, you know, the world's greenest guy, who thinks that we should all be eating vegan burgers and, you know, dressing up in, you know, clothes made of bamboo. Basically, he says carbon capture doesn't work. It's completely and utterly unproven. The countries that do use it on a very, very low level and a very small scale, and it won't actually make any difference to the planet, and it won't make any difference to the greenery of the economy. So it's a complete and utter crock of nonsense. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Sprouts are getting bigger, though. Something to look forward to. This is Talk. Let's get a voice note from Judith on the Brexit squad.
Hello, it's Judith from Altoffs, West Yorkshire. Keir Starmer cozying up to EU. Well, it's said that they want freedom of movement for under 30s and our fishing rights. That'll stop the small boats. because if it gives them things up, people over in the EU will just be able to walk into this country. So they'll not need the small boats. So Yvette Cooper will be able to stand there and say, we've stopped the boats. Yes, they're all coming across on ferries and planes. Thank you.
Well done, Judith. Yeah, I mean, Yvette Cooper is absolutely and utterly confused as hell over what is going on in the Channel. She doesn't seem to know what she's doing. She doesn't seem to know whether they want to stop the boats, how to stop the boats, if they could stop the boats, what that would then mean. She's talking about doing deals with Germany, with Iraq, with the Netherlands, with all sorts of people. But meanwhile, the people keep on coming. Let's talk to Ben Habib, who is, of course, former Deputy Leader of Reform UK. Ben, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
I mean, we're going to get on to Brexit in a minute, but let's kick things off, shall we, with undocumented migrants, because this is my favourite clip of the weekend. This is from Dame Angela Eagle. I'm not quite sure what the point of her is, but have a look at this.
It's not possible to know how many undocumented migrants there are. We only know the ones that we've come across. There are currently 107,000 people in our asylum system. That's the backlog that we inherited, which we're dealing with. But if somebody's here completely illegally and they got here illegally and we've never come across them, we don't know who or where they are.
Sorry for laughing. But, you know, this is the government speaking. They have no idea what's going on.
That was like a Donald Rumsfeld moment. Do you remember when Donald Rumsfeld, you have to be a bit older to remember that event, but was describing what we know and what we don't know.
There are known unknowns, there are known, there are known knowns, there are unknown unknowns, there are things that we don't know. I mean, they've started coming out with all this stuff, though. They have started, I think, reading from the Rumsfeld script, because Keir Starmer said this the other day, that there are things that we know and there are things that we don't know. And you're going, OK, then, yeah, I'll tell you what I know. You're bloody useless, you know.
And I'll tell you what the people know is that the numbers that we're told, the numbers of crossing the Channel, we know, the people know that they're underestimated. We know that all we're seeing is the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
And it's remarkable to hear Yvette Cooper discussing illegal migration in terms of the numbers are too high. Well, actually, Yvette, even one individual entering this country illegally is too high.
Yeah.
You know, they've got the wrong approach. They seem to treat it as if it's a matter of degrees, and they need to just dial down dial down the numbers a little. It's not about dialing down the numbers. It's about stopping people coming to our country illegally.
Yeah.
People of whom we know nothing, who come to this country perhaps with, you know, antipathetic attitudes in their hearts.
Yeah.
Come from war-torn countries where they may blame us for the damage done to their countries, come here with ill will, you know, and obviously all the economic costs, etc., that go with it.
Yeah.
We've got to stop people entering our territorial waters. We've got to nip this in the bud. It's not about a new national border security force or whatever they call it, appealing to the Chinese, as Keir Starmer did on Friday, to stop exporting outboard motors so that dinghies can't get motors. Can you imagine appealing to the Chinese to help us with our border control? It's nothing to do with any of that. It's about developing the political will and the mechanism to enforce our borders in our territorial waters. And I do not accept anyone who said, I don't accept any arguments to the contrary, that in 2024 we can't develop a dedicated force with speedboats, drones, sensors, barricades, whatever it takes to physically stop those boats in the Channel and send them back to France.
I mean, everywhere we look around the world, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Iran, whether it's Israel, whether it's America, they seem to be using an awful lot of drones for doing an awful lot of things. You know, why are we not using drones for a start?
Absolutely.
And I mean, you and I have spoken about this before. You know, to puncture the boats, perhaps, if possible, to stop the boats from taking off in the first place. There's any number of things we could be doing.
Absolutely. With the political will, you could stop it. It's that we haven't got the political will.
Right.
And that's why they cite all manner of international law to prohibit them from doing their job. It's because actually they don't have the political will to do their job in the first place.
And you know what's interesting is that we keep hearing that Labour are now deporting more people than the Tories ever did. And I think the number they've given us is something like 6,900. You know, where have all the lefty lawyers gone? Because remember when the Tories tried to do it, you know, when they were in charge, there would be people like literally lying down in the street outside the Holiday Inn where people were being removed from. There would be lefty lawyers on the plane, basically dragging people off. Keir Starmer was one of them not very long ago. And they now claim, for example, last week that they sent 37 people back to Pakistan. But we've approached the Home Office and said, who are these people? You know, what were they being sent away for? Were they failed asylum seekers? Were they criminals? Were they people who had committed crimes and were yet to be sentenced? You know, who are them? And they were
and they people said, who are just going home.
Right, and they said, we don't want to reveal their identities for fear of retribution. And I'm going, what? We need to know who these people are, don't we?
Yeah, and well, they've left the country. What retribution are they fearing?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I just don't believe a thing that comes out of this government, frankly.
No. I mean, you can't believe a word of it at all. But the thing is, you know, as many as they have sent back, it's a tiny drop in the ocean. I mean, over the course of the last weekend, I think we saw hundreds and hundreds of people just coming this weekend, which even alone dwarfs the 37 people that they sent back. You know, I think 600 people was the number that we got coming through the gates of Dover this weekend. And, you know, it doesn't stop. 21,466 arrivals, up a fifth on the same period last year, taking the total this year to 35,000. You know, we can't any longer complain that that's a small number.
No, 35,000 is over $1.5 billion a year in costs looking after that 35,000.
And it's a small town in Sussex, quite frankly.
It's massive.
Yeah.
And you think we are withdrawing the winter fuel benefit from the elderly, you know, who are going to suffer massively this winter, or already suffering. The winter's already on us. And we're spending over $1.5 billion a year on those who've already come to this country just this year.
Yes.
You know, we're spending the thick end of £8 billion a year on illegal migrants in this country. $8 billion. That is 1.5% off the basic rate of tax.
I know.
It's just remarkable.
It is extraordinary, but they're wasting so much of our money. You know, they keep talking about the £22 billion black hole, and that's why we have to repair the economy, and we have to tax everybody more, and we have to put inheritance tax on families and on farmers, and we have to take winter fuel allowances away. It's all absolute and utter rubbish. You know, Starmer's over in Norway today, supposedly doing deals with the Norwegians about carbon capture, which, as I said earlier, even Dale Vince thinks is a bad idea.
Yeah, and would cost £22 billion on unproven technology.
Right.
Again, the people know you don't need to be a scientist to figure out that capturing carbon, compressing it, putting it down a pipe, drilling deep into our underground aquifers, pumping it in, is going to cost a lot of money.
Right.
And it's not a straightforward exercise. You don't have to be a scientist to know that. So why they get hijacked by these ideological projects, which cost so much money, makes absolutely no sense to me.
No.
£22 billion, just there, happens to be the black hole to which you referred earlier.
Yes.
And just on that black hole, £22 billion, the Chancellor announced £70 billion of spending in her budget. She doesn't talk about it. We've all focused on the tax rises, which go towards funding that £70 billion. And by the way, it only funds about 36 of that $70 billion spending that she committed to. The rest of it is going to come from increased borrowing. Well, who pays for the increased borrowing? It's the British taxpayer.
Exactly.
Ultimately, it's us that pays. And if she gets that equation wrong and we end up in recession, as it looks like we will, we could find that the government can't fund itself because it hasn't got the tax receipts that it thought it would have. And so you end up in a doom loop where our recessionary environment gets worse, sterling goes down, we import inflation because sterling's gone down, interest rates go up to meet to try and prevent sterling from collapsing. The funding requirement becomes even more difficult. The economy goes even further down into the dumps, and we end up in a sovereign debt crisis. That's how dangerous it is with Keir Starmer in charge of the United Kingdom.
Right. And if that wasn't bad enough, we learned this morning that there's all sorts of backdoor conversations going on about sort of renewed ties with the European Union. The story on the front page of the Eye this morning, the EU has told Starmer, your Brexit reset is doomed without a better offer on fish and under 30. So he's basically talking to them about, you know, freedom of movement for under 30-year-olds, which was something that we didn't want to do after Brexit, and giving away once again our fisheries to the bleeding French.
Yeah, well, let's just get one thing straight, Mike. We didn't get Brexit.
No.
We left Northern Ireland behind, and we're still hitched at the hip in many, many significant areas of government policy. State aid, competition, employment. and of course the environment, which we've just been talking about, net zero. And we gave away, I think of the 1,750 odd licenses for fishing in the Channel, over 40% have gone to the European Union. They take a massive amount of fish out of our water already. And what Starmer said before he became Prime Minister, you might recall this, he was in Montreal, he thought he was off camera, and he said, if I were to become Prime Minister, I would align us so closely with the EU that people wouldn't even be able to tell whether or not we were members.
Yes.
And that's where he's going. He set out now a body of people to effectively deliver that result. And I call him the anti-British Prime Minister because he's a Prime Minister who would willingly give over governance of this country to Brussels, willingly take down our borders, and also willingly give up sterling, give up monetary policy. What kind of Prime Minister would do those three things to their own country and against the will of the people, as we know? Keir Starmer is fundamentally anti-British, and that's why he follows the agenda he's following.
Yeah, there's no question about that. He's also the most unpopular Prime Minister in history, according to a poll in the Daily Mail this morning. He's more unpopular than every other single Prime Minister that we've had in our lifetime in this short period of time since he's been in charge. And, I mean, he's clearly being driven by an agenda which, as you say, is not only anti-British, but is clearly sort of Marxist almost. You know, he wants to do away with any kind of history that we've got. He wants to do away with any sort of recompense for, you know, decent, hard-working people. He wants to give more money to the public sector. He wants to give more money abroad. He wants to, you know, suck up to the European Union and do all sorts of, you know, eco-friendly policies which nobody's interested in. You know, the man is a disgrace, quite frankly.
He is. He's one of those. He's a member of the liberal global order who see nation states as an imposition.
Yeah.
This is a generous interpretation. See nation states as an imposition to global prosperity. He doesn't care whether you're a British citizen or an immigrant or foreigner. In his mind, everyone is the same. And that's why he's fundamentally not in touch with what his obligations are. His only obligation, frankly, as Prime Minister is to the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
That's where his obligation lies.
Right.
It's not to...
And he's never here.
He's never here. But, you know, the way they dumb us down, and we've seen this from Tony Blair onwards, is by tying us into international institutions, international treaties, citing international laws to defeat what's required to be done domestically. For example, the European Convention of Human Rights and the European Court is repeatedly cited when they say they can't control our borders. Ditch all these international laws, ditch these treaties which prohibit us from doing what's right for the United Kingdom, and start putting our people first, our country first. That's absolutely critical. We're reaching a point now where Western civilization, by the way, it's not just our country, Western civilization across the board is facing these challenges from politicians who don't understand and care about their nation state. And they've got to reverse that approach dramatically, or we will see the end of Western civilization.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, Giorgia Meloni's got the right idea. She actually made a speech at the weekend where she said, you know, it's not about inviting Africa to come to Europe and basically come and live here. It's about Europe telling Africa and helping Africa to be their own continent and be their own self-sufficient countries so that they can actually have their own prosperity. You know, we should not be advising these people to come to Europe. We should be discouraging that, and we should be helping them possibly to make their own countries better. At least that would be a good idea, wouldn't it?
That's a great idea. And the EU, if I may just say so, in that endeavour is evil, because the EU is mercantilist in its approach, and the way it deals with African countries is not to have trade with them, but to exploit them and to rip away their natural resources. And what we've got to do as a country, and we spend 15 billion a year in international aid, is rein that back. It's not about aid, it's about trade with these countries. Often we have the idiotic situation where we're giving aid to a country but refusing to trade with it because we say it's not ideologically aligned with our values. Pakistan being a very good example. And so the Chinese have moved right into Pakistan, taken control of it, or other forces take control. For example, we won't trade with Afghanistan. So the Taliban are there, and therefore you've got a very destabilized country, and that country then exports its refugees to our country. What we've got to do is stop our foreign interventions, stop bombing countries with which we have no relationship. You know, Iraq, the Arab Spring, all of that was ill-conceived. Start trading with these countries, allow them to become prosperous. And as I started by saying, the EU is a real problem in that endeavour because it is exploitative.
It is, absolutely right. Ben, great to talk to you, as ever. Of course, wouldn't you know it, Keir Starmer's not here today. He's in Norway, talking about carbon capture. And let's get a note on the voice front from Phil.
Hi, Phil in Nottingham here. Love the show, mate. Just thinking, whilst Keir Starmer's in Norway, couldn't we get a locksmith to change the lock on Britain's front door so that he can't get back in?
Yeah, I think Mrs Starmer's already tried that, by the looks of her, anyway. I don't know that for sure, but, you know, just a rumour. One here from Sonia. Morning, Mike. Maybe Starmer hopes to meet Santa as he travels through Norway to get more free gifts. And one here from somebody who doesn't give a name. Oh, John, sorry, driving his truck to Gateshead this morning. He says, tracking gap year Keir Starmer seems like a giant game of Where's Wally? Yeah, very much so. About this one from Jane. Talk after all his travels handing out money to everyone, perhaps when Starmer lands in the UK, he could help his own citizens. Well, that would be nice, wouldn't it? I mean, unbelievable, isn't it? Coming up next, we're going to be talking about the Chinese spy and Prince Andrew. This is H6, apparently a man who cannot be named because his name has been judged to be anonymous by an immigration court. Some MPs, though, are saying we should be able to find out who he is because he's been at the heart of government, he's been at the heart of the royal family. Who is he and what does he want? This is Talk.
What's embarrassing is that it looks like Prince Andrew avoided the constraints that are placed on most sensible people by the Foreign Office and by the intelligence services that keep them safe. When you were a special advisor, you would have come across, if you came across people in the Chinese orbit, you would have come across people who were connected to the United Front Work Department. You just would. But you, like me, like anybody else, was very careful about how you interacted. You took advice from the Foreign Office, you took advice from the intelligence services, and you made sure that you followed the correct protocol.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 24 minutes past 7. Andrew from Dumfries says this, tell me if I'm wrong, but is carbon capture technology not just called trees? Well, there is a bit of that. I mean, unfortunately, what you have to get, of course, from people like Ed Miliband and Keir Starmer is that, oh, well, the thing about carbon capture is, yeah, it is basically just trees, but we've got to invent all of this technology around it to make it look as if we're actually doing something, and then we're going to bury it all in the ground. I mean, I can't help you if you think that the best way forward in scientific sort of, 2024 is to bury stuff in the ground. That's really not very smart. It doesn't seem to me to be the answer. How about this from Tim? Mike, my mate is a train driver. One of his colleagues has had 2 fatal incidents while driving his train. He has been told if he gets one more, he can get pensioned off with full pay. He's 39 years old. Great show. Yeah, I mean, train drivers have not got it any better. I think there is no job in this country that is better paid, better remunerated and with better conditions than being a train driver. And good luck to them, right? But we shouldn't have to keep subsidising their lifestyle. There's always train drivers on Twitter arguing about how hard their job is, Well, it isn't that hard. Sorry, I don't accept that. And, of course, I keep getting challenged by some of them going, oh, you couldn't do what I do. Oh, really? Yeah, let's give it a go then, shall we? Put me in a train, I'll drive it to Scotland. But I won't be allowed to do that because you have to stop after 2 hours and have a rest and then get on another train back to London. You can't actually drive a train to Scotland in one fell swoop. They won't let you do it. Certainly they wouldn't let you do the one that I came back from Scotland on because it took 6.5 bleeding hours. We've got 3 train drivers for that. Chris on Ed Miliband, let's have a listen.
Good morning, Mike. Chris in Northants here. Loving the show. Ed Miliband. Why doesn't anyone challenge him about the carbon footprint of all these eco-friendly things? An electric car has got a life of about 8 years, so it's got no resale value. Wind turbines have probably got a life of up to maybe 30 years, and you just can't recycle them. So all they're going to do is sit there, scouring the landscape, or have to be taken down and buried in landfill. And by the way, a giant Brussels sprout, isn't that just a cabbage?
Yeah, I mean, some people have said that. Can we not bury Ed Miliband in landfill? Nothing personal, Ed. Let's talk to Charles Parton, former diplomat to Hong Kong and China, because the big story this morning on an awful lot of the front pages still is the business with the Duke of York, Prince Andrew. Front page of the Times this morning, the Duke urged to stay out of sight for Christmas. He's been called to do the decent thing after a spying scandal. Because just as the Duke of York, Prince Andrew, couldn't get any more embarrassing, it turns out that he had a long-standing friendship with a bloke from China who was a spy. Known only as H6. His name may come out later on in the day because he may be named in the Houses of Parliament. Let's find out from Charles what he knows about all this. Charles, very good morning to you.
Morning.
So, I suppose we all know that China is a country which has various, shall we say, moving parts, and they probably put people of influence into various places whenever they can, and we've seen a few examples of it. What do you make of this particular story and this particular individual?
I think in this particular case, it's actually a little bit exaggerated. I don't think the damage done by H6 is really justifying the sort of headlines it's getting. And it doesn't say a great deal of the Chinese ability to choose a royal to front for them that they chose Prince Andrew. What it is important is that it actually, I mean, Prince Andrew in a sense has done us a favour because he's brought up into the public eye the fact that China is, as a hostile power, trying to control our politics. And so, some of your earlier speakers, I think, have been talking about the need for this foreign interests registration scheme.
Yeah.
That's right. So, yes, it's a good warning that we should be upping our protection of our own state.
I mean, are they trying to influence our politics or control it, or are they just trying to kind of find out what it is that we're up to? And I mean, I take your point about Prince Andrew. He's hardly at the centre of anything. However, he's an easily corruptible individual, it seems to me, and therefore quite a good target for a spy.
Well, one of the things that was mentioned in the connection with Prince Andrew was the possibility of setting up a think tank, and think tanks advise governments. Yeah. So if you've got a think tank that is funded by the Chinese and is putting out possibly a slightly pro-Chinese or even a very pro-Chinese line, patronised with the patron of a royal, that is not in essence a good thing. But yes, of course the Chinese are trying to change the politics and the policies of many countries around the world, and not least ours. This is part of the what they call the United Front strategy, which is to identify the main enemy, which is the United States and moved allies of the Americans away from pro-America to a neutral position, and those who are neutral to a pro-China position.
Right.
So, yes, they put a lot of effort into it. I mean, look how earlier there was a scandal, if you like, about a Labour MP, Barry Gardiner, who was Shadow Trade Secretary, who received £500,000 of Beijing's money through Christine Lee. That's a case that's subject to a lawsuit at the moment, I understand.
Right. And he denies that he was ever influenced in any way, shape or form. But, you know, on the face of it, you see somebody in receipt of money from what appears to be a foreign entity, and it doesn't look great, apart from anything else.
It doesn't, and you have to ask why the Chinese would bother to spend these large amounts of money, put this large amounts of effort, if they thought that there was no return for it. So, yes, I think it is something that we really need to be protecting ourselves against, while at the same time, of course, we've got to trade with China, investment where it's appropriate, and often some of it isn't, because it's science and technologies which we really shouldn't be using, allowing to help their military or their suppression regime. But where in other areas like global health or climate change, yeah, sure, we should be working as close as we can with the Chinese, but not at the expense of our economic or national security.
No. And I was slightly concerned, as I'm sure you would be, when I saw a story at the weekend that said MI5 are now looking into the relationship that Prince Andrew had with this guy. Surely he should be getting clearance on anybody that he has any close relationships with before he has the relationship, shouldn't he?
Well, I think the big questions, first of all, about his own judgment, but maybe he's not a China expert, but that's, in a sense, what his advisors are for. And if his advisors aren't China experts, they know where to find them.
Right.
And royals in the past have done that. So,
but what I'm saying is, don't they have a sort of clearance procedure? If he's going to be in close contact with somebody who's going to invite into the bosom of the royal family, if you like, albeit that you say he's not, you know, necessarily plugged into, you know, the king, still, you know, the guy was hanging around in Windsor. There was some suggestion that that Andrew had set up this think tank and used Windsor as an address for it. You know, I mean, it seems to me that MI5 should have been all over it before it came out in the papers.
Well, first of all, I think MI5's got very limited resources, but secondly,
that's a bit worrying, isn't it?
Possibly, but I don't think MI5 is going to spend its time surveying the royals and watching who they're in touch with. I mean, it should because you don't survey any more than you survey politicians. You look at the other end of it, and indeed that's what they did. They've obviously picked up H6 and seen his contacts.
Right.
We don't know why he was stopped at the ports, but it wouldn't have been random. There would have been information which led them to do it.
Right.
And so they've unearthed it, but they can't spend their time listening into Andrew's communications.
Well, yeah, but you say that, but on the other hand, there's not very many members of the royal family to keep an eye on, are there? I mean, couldn't they just keep an eye on him?
Well, where do you stop? I mean, do you then start looking at every single politician's influential politician?
But I mean, no, but if you were looking just at the royal family, there's only, half a dozen of them.
Yes, but Prince Andrew is frankly, not a great threat to the security of the realm. And I think in this particular case, MI5 has done its job, picked up what looked like something dodgy and has cauterized it.
Possibly so. But, there may be others that he's been talking to. It seems to me that, if you're going to be, boxing off certain, what you might regard as influential individuals, surely somebody in the royal family is an influential individual no matter what.
Yeah, and I think that's... I don't know, but one would imagine that the security authorities, MI5 and others, do have links with the royal family, and if there's anything that comes... that's worrying, it's up to the royal family to talk about it and get advice on it.
Are you surprised that this guy managed to get his way into sort of meetings with two prime ministers, Theresa May and David Cameron?
No, not at all. I mean, you see what happens. You'll see. I mean, the Tory party frequently has fundraisers. You can buy tables at that, and you can't control who's at that table. And of course,
why can't you? Again, sorry, I mean, what are MI5 doing? Why wouldn't you go, there's a Chinese guy who seems to have a lot of money, he's bought a table, should we not check him out? I mean, that's what I would do.
Yes, but there wouldn't necessarily be a Chinese person who's bought the table. It would be a British citizen who's helping the Chinese, and you don't know who's on the guest list. And given that there would be a number of these occasions.
Well, let me put it this way. I'm going to Parliament for a party this week, right? I'm pretty sure that somebody would have made sure that I'm not going to be a person of, of bad interest, shall we say, walking into the Houses of Parliament. Somebody would have checked me out, I would have thought.
I think you have a somewhat over-enlarged sense of the powers of surveillance.
Really? I had a White House press pass when I worked in America, right? I didn't get that without being cleared by the FBI.
True. If you have a pass to the House of Commons, then you will be looked at. But if you're just, as you were saying, going for a party, there are thousands of people that go into the House of Commons every day. It's open, it's free. So they cannot possibly check every single person's background.
They can't, but it seems as though in certain circumstances they should do a bit more. What about the general kind of consensus about the government's policies with Xi Jinping and how close Britain is to China? Because I know that Ian Duncan Smith is particularly vocal about this. He's one of the people who's been, at the rough end of Chinese sanctions. What do you make of their policy right now?
Well, I don't think there is a policy right now, and certainly they haven't said what it is. What they've said is that they're going to do a China audit, and we don't know when that will finish, but likely sort of end of January time, maybe a bit later. And then they will produce China policy or strategy at some stage, probably in the spring, but springs are very elastic. That could be as late as June, July, and probably is. So we really don't know what a coherent policy is. And if one criticises the government, and I frequently do for its China work, it is that they don't have a policy. I mean, it's not as though China has suddenly arisen since the July election. China and its rise has been going on for many years. So you would hope that the Labour government and its foreign policy advisors would have thought about this long before they came to power and be ready with
Well, you could say that about almost every aspect of their policies on everything, really, couldn't you? I mean, one thing I do know is that when he met up with President Xi in Brazil, I think it was at G7 or a G20 or something, after the conversation, President Xi decided to lock up a load more people in Hong Kong.
Well, they've been doing that for years, and yes, we should rightly be speaking out about that. And Prime Minister did indeed talk about that in Xinjiang and other atrocities that the Chinese.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, after talking to him about it, he went and locked up more people.
Well, I mean, it's locking him up all the time. So whoever talks to Xi Jinping, you could say then the next day they locked up more people. That is so.
Yes. I just thought the two things might be connected. Anyway, Charles, good to talk to you. Thank you very much. Charles Parton, former diplomat to Hong Kong and China. It's a difficult one, isn't it? The Chinese, the Jenga, three-dimensional chess, or whatever you want to call it. It's not easy. However, surely, to God, from what Charles has told me, the MI5 organisation ought to be looking at itself and bucking its ideas up. I mean, they haven't got a time to keep an eye on the royal family. Sorry. They haven't got a time to keep an eye on politicians. Really? Well, what are they doing then, exactly? What are they doing? Maybe somebody can tell me. Let's get a voice note from Diane.
Morning, Mike. What's the difference between forcing gas into the ground, which is brilliant, carbon capture, and taking gas out of the ground, which is the devil, which is fracking? Diane, Southend-on-Sea, bye.
It's a very good question, Diane. I don't know the answer to that. I'll have to ask somebody who's got more qualification than I have. How about this from Peter in Croydon? Morning, Mike. On the drones, I saw one over my flat in June. It had 5 flashing red lights and no noise at all. The drones are showing up all over the planet. Have you seen them then? I don't think I've seen one. I don't think I've seen a drone. Am I missing something? Are there drones constantly flying around all over the place? One here from Nicola in Norfolk. Morning, Mike. Kelly Cates is an excellent choice for match of the day. I'll be sorry to see her leave Sky. She really knows her stuff when it comes to football. Being the daughter of football legend Kelly Dalglish, it is in her blood. Now, I've actually met Kelly. I think she's great. I really do like her. I just wonder about the BBC and their inability to make a decision which is based on anything other than trying to please everybody and getting it completely wrong. They've now decided to have 3 different people to replace Gary Lineker instead of 1. Why not just give the job to Kelly Cates? That's what I would say, and let it be. But instead, no. You've got to give it to Kelly Cates and Dan Walker and somebody else, because the BBC can't make up their minds. Absolutely bloody ridiculous. Nikki says this in Kent. Morning, Mike. Great start to the day, you being on from 6 a.m. Wind turbines are far from green. I'm sure that those blades are transported by a fossil-fuelled truck, as no electric truck could move further than a few feet with that load, then taken out to sea by a fossil-fuelled boat. Then once they're put up, they use, wait for it, oil in their mechanisms. They may then produce some green energy, but does it cover their cost to manufacture? Well, Even better than that, I can tell you, I spoke to somebody yesterday who knows a thing or two about wind turbines, and one of the things that they need an awful lot of is concrete, believe it or not, because when you put them into the bed of the sea, the ocean, or indeed into the ground, as you see there, they have to pour literally tons of concrete into a great big hole to keep them standing. Concrete, as you know, can be grown and it can be used in a bacterially, interesting way, but it's not particularly green, I'm afraid. It really isn't. So the idea that sort of having, wind turbines being green is an absolute load of old cobblers. Even Ed Miliband knows that. He just won't tell you. It's 7:40. I'm Mike Graham.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:42. I'm Mike Graham. Lots more to do, of course. We're here till 10 o'clock. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be along just before that to tell us what's coming up. 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory. It's Monday. We are, I'm telling you, getting closer and closer to Christmas. The 16th of December. It's very mild. I'm not quite sure why that is. There's a storm coming, apparently, as well. There's going to be terrible, terrible traffic. The trains are all screwed up, too. I think we're going to talk to Simon Calder coming up in this hour about Christmas travel chaos. There's quite a lot of chaos around yesterday. Right now, though, let's talk about these drones in America. Dr. Melanie Garson is here, Associate Professor of Political Science at UCL. There was a press conference yesterday. Congressman Chris Smith said this.
Like National Security Spokesman Admiral John Kirby say we know there's no threat. How do they know that? What aren't they revealing? Or are they just saying it? How could anyone speculate or issue assurances to thousands, millions of Americans who have witnessed, thousands who have witnessed the drones, that there is no threat? For weeks, we've asked for the truth.
It's an amazing story, this, isn't it, Dr. Melanie? I can't quite get my head around it. I mean, it surely can't be beyond the wit of the American government to work out where these drones are coming from, and yet nobody seems to know what to do about it.
Good morning. And it's certainly interesting, and it's interesting if you look at it on the band of a wave of actual drone sightings we've seen over the last few weeks, including here in the UK, in Germany, and now over 6 states of the US over multiple times. Although there was a statement made by Jim Hines yesterday that said that it's apparently not Iranians, not Chinese, nor is alien activity. So I'm not sure that gives the measure of reassurances, but certainly there are ways to detect the drones, but without capturing them, taking them down, which without a doubt the US authorities at a certain level have the authority to do. There would be no way to be able to evidence actually the source of the drones.
No. But I mean, people keep saying to me, surely they could just either capture one or shoot one down and look inside it and, figure out where it's come from. It seems to me that, if this is the height of America's kind of, capability with regard to defence of the realm, if you like, it's not very encouraging, is it?
Well, they technically can do it. I think what it's highlighted is a gap on who can do it. So local law enforcement actually don't have some of these capabilities to be able to do it. So there's opening up a massive gap on what does local law enforcement able to do. And shooting down drones, always carries a risk that a piece of flying debris is going to hit someone. So it's not as actually to do it. There are other mechanisms, net capture, interfering by the radar, jamming, and each of those have their risk. I think what's been highlighted here is who has the power and authority to do it, and local law enforcement authorities need to have an upgrade to deal with what is 21st century technology risks.
Yeah. And what do you think it is? I mean, just off the cuff, what's your best guess?
Well, there's, they changed the laws last year in the US that you can start to fly commercial drones at night. There are, we see them all the time. People's weddings and whatnot now have drones in the air. There's about 800,000 registered drones in the US, so commercial. But still, there's sort of lots of things can still be mistaken for them. It can still be low-flying aircraft. Even satellites and stars can appear to look like drones, although the amount of them seems to be
an awful lot of them. And I mean, we saw a guy from the News Nation there, you can just see him in the background there, describing what he saw as what looked like sort of fixed-wing aircraft about 8 feet across. He's not describing, a spaceship. He's describing something quite specific, isn't he?
Exactly, and it's still. I think the oddness in this is the lack of clarity. There are ways of identifying it, and the federal government hasn't. They've said it's not a threat, but they've not clearly stated what it is, which is challenging. And they can be anything, but we do live in a world now where we've got increased use of drones, from everything from precision farming to, photography events, to inspections, to search and rescue. So this is something we're going to have to not just the US, all authorities are going to have to get a grip on.
No, I get that. But it doesn't seem very normal for it to happen at night, where you can't really see an awful lot from up there. I mean, I guess they might have infrared or something going on. I'm just really puzzled as to why American officials and American government, whether it's local or national, doesn't seem capable of working out what it is. It just seems really weird to me.
I don't disagree with you. It does seem odd that they've not captured one, and definitely or two. They have arrested 2 people in Boston that we do know, and they have arrested 2 people that are being held on charge, and that might just be with irresponsible flying. And there can be also an effect that 1 or 2 come out and you get sort of malicious actors or the equivalent of joyriders that think they're just going to have a laugh and put more out there. And I think that also complicates the issue, and that has been also mooted that this is part of what is going on, sort of an effect to do it. But nonetheless, it can be worrying. The areas, I think, of which they're being flown over is concerning. They've had to shut an airport for an hour. Does have a commercial impact. So there are multiple levels of problems that need to be unpacked here, and certainly the messaging, whilst the don't worry message is probably not very reassuring in this case.
No, I think so. Dr. Melanie Garson, thank you very much indeed, Associate Professor of Political Science at UCL. I think if I was, the Secretary of State or something, I'd be going, look, get me some of these drones, find out who's flying them, take the drones down, go and arrest the people and tell them to stop doing it. I mean, how hard can that be? Really, seriously. 7:48.
some of the countries that have assisted dying euthanasia, they're changing the legislation to allow people to choose it who have no physical illness whatsoever. I'm worried that we need proper mental health assessments as part of this process, because the way the slippery slope argument goes, eventually, because people want to die without intractable suffering, this legislation may allow that. Wanting to die can be a rational decision in the face of intractable suffering, but sometimes it's an irrational decision that arises through psychological or emotional dysfunction.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Back to Morning Glory, 7:52. I'm Mike Graham, and there is time only now to speak to the one and only travel guru of the millennium, and that is, of course, Mr. Simon Calder, travel correspondent for The Independent. Simon, a very good morning to you. Welcome.
Good morning, Mike. Yep, very kind of you. And unfortunately, we are now getting into those last 10 days before Christmas, when everything starts to go very wrong indeed. Starting last night, actually, in this little advent calendar of disruption with the closure of Edinburgh Airport.
Oh, yes, I saw that. But hang on, you say it's starting there. It actually started before that, because I noticed you tweeted out yesterday morning that most Great Western Railway intercity trains were cancelled. Most ScotRail trains were cancelled. Northern also axed all trains on 9 routes, saying, we haven't got any drivers. I thought ASLEF had just got a massive pay rise. What the hell is going on?
Well, what they got was 15% compounded and backdated, and they are in an awful lot of train operators, including Great Western Railway and Northern, but only west of the Pennines, not required to work on Sundays. And so it's 2 Sundays before Christmas. You probably want to spend time with your family.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
but again, it's, this is Louise Hay giving them, loads and loads of money without getting any concessions from them. Most people who work in public service, front-facing businesses work on the weekends. Why don't they?
Because they never have had to, and if they were going to do that, they would want a couple of extra percent to
of course
bolster
they would. Well, they're being offered £600 for an extra shift now to work on a Sunday.
Well, yes, but sometimes, time with family, this, Mike, is more important than the money.
Not true. I'd rather spend less time with my family, to be honest. I mean, in fact, to me, if I could work 7 days a week, I'd prefer it. But, occasionally I have to go and see them.
Okay. I'm sure they would pay you good money.
They'd also agree with me, by the way. By the time it gets to Sunday, they're more than happy to kick me out and say, get back to London. Let's talk about the Edinburgh Airport closure, though. What was that all about?
OK, IT failure. Now, this wasn't anything to do with NATS, National Air Traffic Services.
Okay.
They were the people who you will remember had the big problem on August bank holiday last year, when basically the main system...
It all fell over. And the bloke who was meant to fix it was working from home, so it took a long time for him to get to the office, didn't it?
Well, only 90 minutes, he might have been able to fix it, but his password wouldn't work remotely, so it was all a bit of a muddle.
Unbelievable.
In which we had an awful lot of very upset people, 2,000 cancelled flights, about 300,000 people who had their hands torn up. But this was completely unrelated. This was an IT problem involving, and there's going to be a test afterwards, Air Navigation Services Limited, OK, and they are a different company, and they run the tower at Edinburgh Airport. That stopped. They couldn't have any landings or takeoffs. We had diversions to Manchester, to Glasgow and to Newcastle airports. Loads of planes cancelled. Probably about 5,000 people who had their journeys completely wrecked.
Yes.
And then you have people like the lot who were going to Doha, who left five hours later, I think. And guess what? Most people go on Qatar Airways to Doha because they've got a connection within the next couple of hours. That didn't go well for them. I'm sorry to say.
And I'm sorry to say that an awful lot of these IT systems don't seem to have very much of a backup. When they fall over, there doesn't seem to be anything that can kick in to make sure everything can be done. It seems amazing to me that in this day and age we don't have proper backup systems for all of these, you know, very complicated electronic scenarios?
Well, it's so interesting that the burden falls on the airline. So the airline obviously pays the air traffic control company to do some air traffic controlling. But if it goes wrong, the people who are on the hook are the airlines, because they have to. Everyone, for instance, on the Ryanair flight to Bratislava, which didn't go last night, has to be put up in a hotel at Ryanair's expense, given all their meals, and then found another flight. So that's, it's costing many thousands of pounds. But it's not the air traffic controllers. However, I dare say they will have some sort of clause in their contract with Edinburgh Airport which says we'll try and make sure that it all works, and here's what we'll do if it doesn't. But at least it was only 4 hours. There were reports on social media that it was going to be awful till this morning. And talking of this morning, of course, some of the planes couldn't get in last night, so we've already seen the Air France flight to Paris cancelled because the pilots weren't there because they were unable to get in.
Yeah, sacre bleu. Now, you're going to tell me that it's going to get worse and worse, isn't it, over Christmas as we get closer to Christmas, because apparently the roads are going to be knackered, the trains are not going to be running, the planes are not going to be running. You know, why do we have to put up with this every bleeding year?
But it's the public. I blame them.
Do you? What, for moving?
Yes.
Sorry for moving. Stop moving.
Yes. So we've got... What we've got is... OK, both the RAC and the AA have put out forecasts of how horrible it's going to be. They don't exactly disagree. They sort of slightly overlap. So I've gone through them both so you don't have to. And according to the RAC, it's going to start with pre-Christmas panic this coming Wednesday and Thursday.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
We then, everyone agrees, go into Frantic Friday, which the AA says is going to be the busiest day of the winter. What you're going to get on Friday night is a combination of all the usual work traffic plus people beginning their getaway journeys. So that's going to be very messy. And guess what? The M25 west of London isn't going to be terrific. The AA also says the M4 going west to Bristol, the M6 in the West Midlands, and a special appearance by the A38, which I assume is Bristol Airport, south of the city. And so that's going to be horrible on Sunday.
So would you advise people then, if they wanted to go away for Christmas or get away for Christmas, wait till Monday then?
Well, don't know. Sunday's looking all right. Monday is looking messy.
Really?
You're going to get extra congestion on the M1 from Luton to Northampton, the M5 Bristol to Taunton, the good old A303. Who could forget that route from
At least you get to see Stonehenge, though, if you go that way.
Exactly, Stonehenge, and the M42 and special guest appearance, a little cameo from the A64 around York. That's going to be awful on Monday. But actually, the RAC says the busiest single day for getaway journeys is going to be Christmas Eve. Peak time is going to be 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And honestly, the best way to avoid the jams is either start off very early in the morning or go after they've all subsided, which on the 24th is going to be after 4 p.m.
Yeah, or just don't go anywhere. Just stay exactly where you are and make people come to you. That's what I would suggest. Simon, very good to talk to you as ever. Thank you very much indeed. Simon Calder, travel guru from The Independent. 6 years ago today, by the way, hundreds of flights were cancelled at Gatwick Airport because of drone sightings. Remember that? Close to the runway. They never did find the drones. It was all rubbish, wasn't it? What's going on? This is Talk.